Last year, I made the single largest investment ever in my smart home. This was to install a full Tesla Energy setup. That's a full solar array on our roof, as well as not one or two, all the way up to four Tesla Powerwall 2 Powerwalls on the side of our house as well. My goal was simple. I wanted to slash that high cost electric bill every month. I didn't want to see that thing anymore. Also, I wanted some energy independence where we could really control our own fate because here in central Pennsylvania, we lose power a lot. We have all kinds of storms here. We have the thunderstorms over the summer with the high winds and lightning and a lot of rain with those. We also have blizzards over the winter too. So we have all kinds of conditions here. So I'm trying to figure out, was this really worth it? I've compiled all of my data. And when I say all of my data, that means all of our electric use at our house on an hourly basis going back more than 5 years. I paired that from our electricity company up with our Tesla information and ran all the numbers. So we're going to dive deep into it here. Welcome back, everyone, to Josh's Smart Home. If you're new here, I just want to let you know that I've been building out my smart home for about 10 years now, and I want to share with you what I've learned along the way to make your home smarter. Just as a refresher, I have more than a 23 kilowatt solar system on our roof, and I have four of the Tesla Powerwall 2 power banks on the side of our house that are able to store more than 50 kilowatt hours of power. So this is a pretty massive system. The promise from Tesla is a future of clean energy, lower costs, and uninterrupted power backup. So that's the sales pitch, but what really happens, because sometimes they're not the same, we're going to dive right in. All right, I want to start in the Tesla app just to show you what's in here before we get into the bigger numbers. And I am an older millennial, so when we get out to the bigger numbers, I will be using my laptop at that point. So here you can see the app, and you can see the overview of all the different information regarding the solar, the home, Powerwall, and the grid. And in any of these, you can go into the particular item. I'm going to go into the solar, for instance, here. And you can see all kinds of views, the lifetime, and I'm recording this a little bit after a year, so you can see 35.2 megawatts here. You can see for the year, and you can see, each of the months there, and you can see last year as well. And obviously, you get more power over the summer than you do in the winter. And you can even go down to the month or the day, even. And you can see how you can have the grid of the arch, the parabola, or something along those lines, if you will, of the solar production throughout the day. Usually for us peaking somewhere around 1 p.m. You can see when it's really cloudy how it drops significantly. You can also go into the different pieces of your home, so you can look at the home usage and you can see different spikes and everything. I think at that time maybe the pool filter was on, or something else was going on there that it was really high. You can go to the vehicle, so that one might need to do like a monthly view to see some charging going on there. You could look at the power walls, the charging and discharging. That's one we'll get back to. I've actually utilized the energy arbitraging of the power walls to lower our electricity bill. So we'll get into that once we get into the numbers a little deeper. And last but not least, here you can see the grid. So in this month, thus far, we did import 237 kilowatt hours in this case. And you can go back, and we imported last month as well. We exported the month before and exported the month before that. So it is a mixed bag there, whether we're importing or exporting, but the numbers, they are slightly different. So let's jump over to the laptop and get really deep into the numbers. All right, now that we're gonna get deeper into the numbers, I just want to start with the bill. And the reason I'm starting with this is just to show you that there's going to be a slight discrepancy because this does not utilize calendar months where Tesla does. So what I did was utilized June through May on the Tesla information. And for this purpose, I utilized the end of May, which was 11th in this instance, through the end of May the next year. So really, I guess the beginning of the June cycle to the end of the May cycle the following year. So that's how I kept it apples to apples as much as possible. Let's jump over to the first thing of how much do we generate? And this is all from the Tesla app, but I did validate it through linking it over with the electric company's information just to make sure that everything tied down nicely, and it definitely did. So what we generated here was 28.1 megawatt hours. Those are 1,000 kilowatt hours, so like 28.1 thousand kilowatt hours, or 28,100, if you will, kilowatt hours of electric we produced during that 12-month period. And in this instance, starting June 1st through the end of May from the Tesla information. And I do want to point out here exactly what I explained a couple minutes ago, where you see these big peaks over the summer, the 2.6 through 3.6 megawatt hours per month, and then you have these couple months in the winter where it doesn't even hit 2. So 1.1 to 1.6 megawatt hours is what we were getting over those winter months. So you're probably wondering, how energy independent are we? Well, as far as the solar covering the whole house, we're really not that energy independent. We only produce about 84% of what we use. But that is making the assumption that we utilize everything and it's all a necessity. This includes a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, a fully electric vehicle, a pool with a pump, our lawnmower, snow blower, snow plow, that's all electric. Even our weed whackers and our blowers, our leaf blowers, all electric. So we do have a huge demand for electricity at our house, but it's not always necessary. So if we needed to, we could cut back in some instances, and that's where we'll get into the Powerwall in a little bit. And the part that really hits the wallet that you've all been waiting for is, what's our electric spend now? So I'm going to go through this a couple different ways. I'm going to tell you what we were spending and now what we're spending, as well as what is the payback period, the return on investment that we're talking about for our system in our use case. Well, before we installed solar, we were spending over $400 a month on average. Like $5,000 a year. It was ridiculous. I don't know why we had to spend so much money. When now, after the solar, we actually, over the 12-month period from May 10th to May 10th, 2024 to May 11th, 2025, we spent a grand total of negative $52.65. Yeah, we paid bills for the first 11 months, and then we got a credit that was more than the bills that we paid during that time that we're going to carry over and pay the future bills out of. And you're asking, how does all this work? Why do you have a bill that's almost negative $3,000 and all the rest of your bills were 200 and something, throughout the year? I'm going to explain that. And that was the energy arbitrage that I was talking about earlier, but I'll get into a little bit more detail. And in case you didn't believe me with that other screenshot regarding the power bill and the negative almost $3,000 power bill, here you can see that we had the previous balance of 227 that was paid off. So we had a balance of 0, and we produced enough that we got credit for $2,800. And you can see the delivered and the readings for the received as well, for the power company, how much they received back, as well as the net banked information. So here we can see the overall net banked. That includes the deposit as well as the true up in this instance where they paid it out. So we have the banked from the prior month plus the current banked, any credits that we utilized during the month, and then zeroing those out. So this is the on peak here, the off peak, and the super off peak. And here you can see our rates and all the different, calculations that go into this bill, and the current consumption of negative $2,812. And that's mostly from this on peak that we had about 12 megawatts of power built up that we sold for $2,700 at this point. So that our electric bill should essentially be paid for the next year. And you can see our monthly usage, it looks like it's really low that 1 month, but that was just because we didn't have permission to operate the whole time. So we're utilizing a lot of our own power to use on site and then not export it out. So we couldn't export it out to the grid, but we could utilize it here. So for this, I'm going to jump back to the Tesla app. And as you can see, we have our Powerwall reserve set up on a time-based control, utilizing 20% all the time for power outages, but using that other 80% for that energy arbitrage that I talked to you about. And that's made possible by utilizing a time of use plan. And here you can see that I input our our costs for the different times and what those periods are, so that we can go and let the system optimize everything, and it'll charge the Powerwalls during the really cheap time and then push it back to the grid during the expensive time, and utilize our Powerwalls to make the most money for us. One thing I do want to point out is there is a cost to utilizing the Powerwalls in this way. Not only do you have wear and tear on them, but you do lose a percentage of the power as you're charging up and discharging constantly from the Powerwalls. A quick estimate is I think it's about 15% or so that we lost, 13, 14%, something like that, of the power we lost in the charge and discharging of the Powerwalls. And like I said, it may result in the Powerwalls not lasting as long either, but that's a consideration you need to make, and you can make your own, decision on how you'd want to use them if you install Powerwalls. The other number I told you I'd talk about was the return on investment. So we spent over $59,000 on our system. That includes the Tesla solar panels as well as the Powerwalls, and that is net of the tax credits that you get with those. How many years is it going to take? I did some calculations and I went all the way back to 2020. And I should probably make some notes here because 2020, we had no EVs, no pool, etc. So definitely a much different environment here in 2020. When 2021, we had one plug-in electric hybrid vehicle, and that was it. And then we had a pool and plug-in electric hybrid vehicle. And then in 23, it was still the same situation. And then we had EV, pool, and the PHEV in 2024. So from the summer 23 onward, approximately. And that's not exactly, when it occurred, but it's a pretty close approximation. So during these periods of time, obviously the return on investment during that first year where we didn't have as much electricity being used at our house is about 19 years. That would not have been a good investment. I'm going to certainly cross that one off the list. And even the first one where we don't have the pull or the second EV, the full electric vehicle, that's again probably not a good estimation. So the other years, they would indicate it's about 11, 12-year payback. This is one way I calculate it, assuming that we used everything that we used those prior years and then adding back that $52 or whatever it was to the amount, dividing the total cost by that to come up with the number of years. But there's a better way. And this is once I, thought about this a little bit more, I figured I should probably figure out exactly how many kilowatt hours we used within our house and then multiply it by the kilowatt cost, and just an average that I was using here of 18 cents for our area because that seems about appropriate. And then adding back that excess credit, it was about $52, and that leads us to 9.71 years. So the payback period is somewhere between 9 and 12 years, I think is a good conservative, fair estimate of the payback period. And that's not the only benefit you get from Tesla Solar when you pair them with Powerwalls, at least. Real reason that you get the Tesla solar Powerwalls is so you don't lose electric. So over the last year, we had 17 different times that we lost electric at our house, and the longest was 4 hours. It was a total of 7 hours. Usually, the year before we got this, it was way more than that, and it was, full days sometimes. So we've gotten really lucky, if you will, during the first year. But if it comes up, we have power even when our neighbors don't. It doesn't matter, what's happening here. We have power. I just want to demonstrate to you what that really looks like. So what happens when you go off the grid is this. So I'm going to click it to take us off grid, and you'll be able to see that the lights did nothing. They didn't do anything, but we are off grid. It says right now we have 1.6 hours of backup remaining, and that just indicates that at our current pace, we would have that margin of time. With that being said, I have a lot of automation set up, so as soon as we go off grid like this, they shut down. It might take a minute or so for them to realize that through the Home Assist integration, because I don't want, if we lose power for a second, for all those things to go off. There you can see the grid power outage alert, and everything has been reduced. So all the extra things like fish filters and those kinds of things that we really don't need for our daily life, it shuts all those off. And then to restore the grid when it's just a grid outage you're causing yourself, you can just reconnect. But this is only when you are causing the outage yourself. If you lose power, it backs up just the same, where the lights don't even tend to flicker or anything. These are all LED, so they're really sensitive to those power surges and everything. But the Powerwall does an awesome job. I would say once or twice we may have seen a flicker. Usually the only reason we know the power is out is we get the alert on our phone, or we're in one of the rooms that has a fish tank, we hear it shut off. Other than that, we wouldn't even know because the lights usually don't blink. And here you can see the power grid was restored, and then everything returns back to normal. Everything's checked to the status, and the fish tanks and everything, the filters are all turned back on. And of course, like anything else, it's not all perfect. So what are the downsides? System like this is a huge financial commitment. And like I said, it was like 59,000, a little over 59,000 for us to have it installed after the tax credits. So that is a huge investment. So like I said, I've been closely tracking, even before we installed it, some estimates of what the return on investment is. And if you live anywhere like I do, the electric prices just tend to go up. So I'm hopeful that the payback will maybe even be quicker than what I've been estimating, but I've been trying to be conservative. But it's definitely a big consideration because this is a huge investment. If you're not planning on staying where you're at, it's probably not worth it. The second thing, it's probably solar 101, but you are weather dependent. If we're off grid and there's no sunlight, cloudy days every day, we will run out of power. We don't have this infinite power loop here with some magical formula that just all of a sudden produces energy. But we can really cut back what we use. We have all kinds of different electronics and everything that could be turned off. We could avoid charging our EV or our plug-in hybrid, especially the plug-in hybrid. We can just run it on gas. It's not a big deal. We can avoid charging things like the lawnmower. We can even utilize different HVAC systems depending on the weather and location, in our house that we want to be. We can really reduce costs that way as well. The next thing is the Tesla experience. Now, don't get me wrong, my experience was absolutely awesome. Everything, was very quick from Tesla's side. We're not even going to talk about the electric company because that was not quick. But everything from the Tesla side that they control, it happened very, very quickly. A lot of times the next day, the next thing was happening. When they were waiting on the electric company, like I said, totally different story. But the Tesla side, everybody was professional. Everybody that came out was super nice, very personable. Didn't have any issues with them, but it is a large company at this point and a lot of things happening, and these are really technical products. So you may end up having, your own situation where you run into a couple problems. So just be aware of that as well. So after a full year and producing thousands of kilowatt hours and dodging some blackout periods, was it worth it? For me and my family, it was a resounding yes. We couldn't be more thrilled. It's awesome when, something happens and the electric goes out, but ours doesn't. And when we're producing all this electricity that's powering all of our devices, our computers, our phones, our lights, our air conditioning units, we have mini splits as well as a central air conditioning unit upstairs. The EV, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, the lawnmower, the snowplow, the snowblower, the pool equipment, which is a total electricity hog. All of these things really add up, but they don't add up in our electric bill. This is one of the best upgrades I've made to my smart home. And I did mention briefly that it does integrate with Home Assistant, which is really cool too, and allows for automations based on what's happening with the solar, the grid. You can do different predictions from Home Assistant. There's all kinds of opportunities there. And we have that independence where we aren't really providing all of our electricity, but we can control all kinds of things like how much power we store on site. So if there is ever a grid outage, we can back up right from that. Even if it's not sunny out, we have our power right there. And I want to hear from you. Are you thinking about solar? Have you already taken the plunge? What have your experiences been like? Leave your stories and other comments in the comments section below. I read every one of them, and I just love hearing from you. If this video helped you in any way, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like it and hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. And I'm going to continue to produce smart home content that can make your home smarter. So I'll see you in the next one.